10 famous people who committed suicides and why they did it, including their social and political motivations. If you are suicidal, call this hotline in USA 1 800 273 8255, 24 hours every day.
Warning: watching this video must not encourage anyone to commit suicide just because many famous people chose to do so. If you are depressed, you must seek counseling from a psychotherapist or psychiatrist. Modern medicines treat depression very well. Depression is an illness of mind, and like physical illness, it is a sin to commit suicide. Robin Williams, 1951-2014, was an American actor and stand-up comedian. He starred in many movies. Williams had a very successful career in both stand-up comedy and movie acting. He won his Academy Award for his role as the therapist. How did Robin Williams kill himself? The actor and comedian hanged himself with a belt wedged in a door frame at his home after cutting one of. Why did Robin Williams resort to suicide? Williams was an alcoholic. He was also addicted to cocaine. He had strong depression in the final years of his life. 1 month before his death, Williams went to rehab for his alcoholism. His widow stated that he had been diagnosed with ERT. It was also revealed that he had Lewy body dementia. He also suffered from delusional fears and paranoia. Virginia Woolf, 1882-1941, was a British writer, considered one of the most important modernist 20th century authors, and a pioneer in the use of stream of consciousness as a narrative device. Her works are widely read all over the world and have been translated in. How did Virginia Woolf kill herself? On 28 March 1941, Woolf drowned herself by filling her overcoat pockets with stones and walking into the river Ouse near her home. Her body was not found until 18 April. Her husband buried her. Why did Virginia Woolf resort to suicide? The main reason people commit suicide is depression, which can be caused by many factors. After completing the manuscript of her last novel, Woolf fell into a depression similar to that which she had earlier experienced. The onset of World War II, the destruction of her lung condition until she was unable to work. After World War II began, Woolf's diary indicates that she was obsessed. Adolf Hitler was the dictator of Nazi Germany. He launched wars of aggression against most of his neighboring countries. He occupied many countries. Finally, he invaded Soviet Union in June 1941 in the famous Operation Barbarossa. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, fought back hard and drove back Nazi forces. Finally, in late April 1945, they captured eastern Germany. Hitler and his new wife Eva Braun killed themselves in their bunker. How did Hitler kill himself? In late April 1945, as Soviet forces stormed Berlin, Hitler made plans for his suicide. 2 days earlier, Mussolini had been shot by a firing squad and then publicly hung by his feet in a suburban square in Milan, Italy. Hitler felt that assemblies of Hitler and his new wife, Eva Braun, were found in the bunker with a bullet hole in Hitler's temple. Hitler had taken cyanide pills and. Why did Hitler resort to suicide? Hitler was severely depressed after suffering numerous military defeats, one after another, starting late 1941 at the hands of his arch-nemesis Joseph Stalin. But Hitler was not depressed like normal people. He had a very strong mind and willpower to fight to the bitter end. But instead of fighting himself, he chose the easy way out, i.e. suicide. His new wife was loyal to him till the very end. His propaganda chief Goebbels and his wife too killed themselves on May 1st after putting to death their
Field Marshal Rommel. Rommel was a German general, field marshal, and military theorist. By 1944, he became convinced that for Germany to win the war was impossible, and he came to contact with some people conspiring to overthrow Hitler. When an attempt was made on Hitler's life, his defeatist attitude led Hitler to suspect him and he was given the option of killing himself and saving his family and reputation, or refusing and have his family killed. He killed himself and was buried with full military honors. They announced that his death was due to his battle wounds. How did Rommel kill himself? On October 14, 1944, two generals from Hitler's headquarters, Bergdorf and Meisel, visited Rommel at his home. Bergdorf informed him of the charges and offered him three choices. He could choose to defend himself personally to Hitler in Berlin, or if he refused to do so, which would be taken as an admission of guilt, he would either face the People's Court, which would have been tantamount to a death sentence, or choose a quiet suicide. In the former case, his family and his staff would have been executed. In the latter case, the government would claim that he died a hero and bury him with full military honors, and his family would receive full pension. Bergdorf had brought a cyanide capsule. Rommel chose to die with cyanide pills. He said goodbye to his wife and son and his aide and drove in the car with Bergdorf and Meisel. After a few minutes, he consumed the cyanide pills in the car. His aide was informed by a phone call that he had died. His son later wrote a letter giving his first-hand account about what had happened. After the suicides of Hitler and the Goebbels, Generals Bergdorf and Krebs too committed suicide, but their suicides were voluntary and not forced.
Sylvia Plath was an American poet, novelist, and short story writer. In 1982, she won a posthumous Pulitzer Prize for the collected poems. Beginning in October 1962, Plath experienced a great burst of creativity and wrote most of the poems on which her reputation now. How and why did Plath kill herself? Plath was clinically depressed for most of her adult life and was treated multiple times with electroconvulsive therapy, ECT. She died by suicide in 1963. Before her death, Plath tried several times to take her own life. On February 11, 1963, Plath died of carbon monoxide poisoning with her head in the oven, having sealed the rooms between her and her sleeping children with tape, towels and clothes.
Kuyili. Kuyili was an Indian freedom fighter. She is famous for her suicide attack in 1780. She applied ghee, that is clarified butter, set herself ablaze and jumped into the armory of the British colonialists, securing victory for Velu Nachiyar. Kuyili was born in the 18th century at Kudanchavadi near Sivaganga district. The Tamil Nadu government in India erected a memorial to Kuyili in the Sivaganga district.
Jim Jones was an American religious cult leader. He and his associates were responsible for organizing a mass suicide of 918 followers in Jonestown, Guyana, 304 of whom were children. The people died by drinking cyanide-laced drink. He was the leader of the People's Temple cult which Anna. Representative Leo Ryan led a delegation into the commune in Guyana to investigate what was going on. Ryan and others were murdered by gunfire while boarding a return flight with defect. Why did Jim Jones and followers kill themselves? Jim Jones was a charismatic cult leader and was a master in controlling people's minds. He also believed in racial integration, and in Jonestown 68% of residents were black. While Jones always spoke of the social gospel's virtues, he chose was actually communism until the late 1960s. By that time, Jones began partially revealing the details of his apostolic socialism concept in temple sermons. During mass suicide, when members cried, Jones counseled, "Stop these hysterics. This is not the way for people who are social die. We must die with some dignity." At the end of the tape, Jones concludes, "We didn't commit suicide. "We committed an act of revolutionary suicide protesting the conditions of an inhumane world." This mass suicide was the largest killing of Americans until that time and was surpassed only by the killings of 9. Mohamed Atta was an Egyptian hijacker and one of the ringleaders of the September 11, 2001, and 9/11 attacks, in which 4 commercial aircrafts of USA were hijacked in coordinated attacks with the intention of destroying high-value civilian targets. He served as the hijacker pilot of American Airlines Flight 11 and crashed the plane into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. In the 9/11 attacks, 2,996 people died, including 19 hijackers, and more than 6,000 were injured. This was the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil in history. Why and how did Atta and other hijackers kill themselves? Atta flew his plane into the North Tower and thus killed himself and caused the tower to come crashing down. Other hijackers, mostly Saudis, did the same thing to the South Tower and Pentagon with other planes. There are conflicting explanations for Atta's motivation. One view is that Atta was suicidal and that his struggles with social isolation, depression, guilt, shame, hopelessness, and rage were similar to the struggles of those who commit conventional suicide and murder-suicide. By this view, Atta's political and religious beliefs affected the method of his suicide and his choice of target, but they were not the underlying causes of his behavior. Some have suggested that Atta and his fellow hijackers were just following orders from al-Qaeda leadership, and whatever their charismatic leader Osama bin Laden said was the right thing for them to do for their cause. In turn, one political scientist has claimed that Atta was motivated by his commitment to the political cause, that he was psychologically normal, and that he was not readily characterized as depressed. Mohamed Bouazizi was a Tunisian street vendor who killed himself by setting himself on fire. This suicide by an unknown poor man became a catalyst for the Tunisian revolution and the wider Arab Spring revolt against autocratic regimes. His suicide was in response to the confiscation of his wares and humiliation inflicted on him by a municipal official and her aides. Public anger and sporadic violence worsened following Bouazizi's death. That led to the then president of Tunisia, Ben Ali, to step down after 23 years in power. The success of the Tunisian protests inspired protests in several other countries, plus several non-Arab countries. In 2011, Bouazizi was posthumously awarded the Sakharov Prize for his contribution to historic changes in the Arab world. The Tunisian government honored him with a postage stamp. He got Nero was the last Roman emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. His great-uncle Claudius adopted him and made him his heir and successor. Like Claudius, Nero became emperor with the consent of the Praetorian Guard. Nero's mother, Agrippina the Younger, was likely implicated in Claudius's death as emperor. She dominated Nero's early life and decisions until he cut her off his back. 5 years into his reign, he had her murdered. In 68 AD, one governor rebelled against him. This governor was supported by another governor. This revolt failed in its immediate aim, but Nero fled. Military authorities chose Galba as emperor. He committed suicide when he learned that he had been tried in absentia and condemned to death as a public enemy, making him the first Roman emperor to commit